Good morning, everyone. Again, thank you for joining this virtual roundtable. There will be two presentations, and there will be also an opportunity to ask questions. So after this hour, or a little bit under an hour, you have learned more about what the Netherlands Innovation Network can do for Dutch innovators. You will learn about the innovation ecosystem in the northeast coast of the U.S. You will hear from NOWRDC about the R&D innovation roadmap and the future planning with this regard. This is the program that I touched upon. I will start with the introduction and then hand the floor over to Bruce afterwards. So I work for the Netherlands Innovation Network. It's a worldwide a network, as you can see. Within the US, we have 3 offices. What's special about our office in Boston is that usually our colleagues are either based at the embassy, like Marcella in the meeting too, or at the consulate in San Francisco, but our office in Boston, our closest consulate is in New York, but we decided to place our innovation network here in Boston to be closer to the ecosystem. So this is where all the magic happens in terms of innovation, we feel like. So this is our broader economic network in the US. You'll see that most of them are consulates or embassies. And for Boston, you'll see that our focus area is life sciences, health, and climate tech. And for very specifically for this year, our focus is offshore wind. So what do? We strengthen Dutch innovation by connecting companies, research institute, and government worldwide. And you'll see our target groups are either companies, so research institute, or government bodies. And we do that in several ways. So like organizing innovation mission, but also sessions like these. In the Netherlands, we've identified 10 key technologies where we're going to specifically focus on for the coming years. And so for this offshore wind mission, our aim is to connect, hopefully, these key technologies to offshore wind. So looking for opportunities of specifically AI to also explore how that can be applicable to offshore wind. So really connecting these technologies which have used in different sectors, but now connecting it to offshore wind. So even if it's not developed yet, we're very curious to see what the potential could be. Yeah, so for offshore wind, it's like the focus, the potential interesting key technologies are 7, 8, and 9. So AI, energy materials, or semiconductor technologies. So I'll leave it with that, and I would love to give the floor to Bruce, who is Managing Director Offshore Wind at MassCEC. Hi, Bruce.
Hi, good morning, Kim. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, good to be
I'll jump right in and say a few welcome remarks and keep us moving along. So, right. So, good morning, everybody, or is it good afternoon overseas? Good day, everyone. Bruce Carlisle, Managing Director for Offshore Wind with the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, or MassCEC, as we're often referred to. It's good to be joining everybody here on this webinar, looking at the offshore wind innovation ecosystem in the U.S. and research and development opportunities for the Netherlands. For those of you who may not be familiar with us, MassCEC is an economic development agency. We're focused on accelerating the clean energy and climate solution innovation that is critical to meeting Massachusetts offshore wind and climate goals. We have 4 primary areas of focus: high performance buildings, clean transportation, net zero grid, and offshore wind. And across all of these areas, we support the growth and advancement of a clean energy workforce with an emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Offshore wind is a cornerstone of the Commonwealth's climate strategy, We've done the road mapping and work necessary to understand the pathways as we decarbonize our economy. And our 2050 Clean Energy and Climate Plan points to about 23 gigawatts for Massachusetts in terms of offshore wind capacity. That's, for the next 25 years, that's about a gigawatt of installed capacity for a year. And we've been working with the industry for over a decade, helping to reduce project risk, increase market confidence, and support the economic development and workforce opportunities of the sector. And as all of you know, with the envisioned scale of offshore wind development in the coming decades, the need for new technologies, new approaches, new solutions will increase. As the industry grows, there'll be challenges associated with larger turbines, deeper waters, longer distances, transmission and grid integration, energy storage, and of course, compatibility with our existing fishing and other maritime uses, wildlife protection, and an unflinching attention to safety. Research and technological innovation are key to meeting these goals. MassCEC is committed to supporting and advancing clean energy innovation. And over the past decade, we've invested and awarded more than $650 million, attracted over $2.6 billion in private and federal capital. We've helped enable an 80% growth of the clean energy workforce and directly supported over 900 companies. A few highlights, sort of in the near term as I wrap up my remarks. Just some near-term activities I'd like to share. Top of mind is work we're currently engaged in advancing a new Ocean Renewable Innovation Center in New Bedford, providing facilities and services to support startups and small, medium enterprises to address key challenges to commercialization and deployment of ORE technologies. We're collaborating with UMass Amherst and a number of other partners on the Academic Center for Reliability and Resilience of Offshore Wind, a new U.S. Department of Energy National Center of Excellence to accelerate reliable and equitable offshore wind energy deployment across the nation and produce a well-educated domestic offshore wind workforce. And we are strengthening and doubling down our commitment to the National Offshore Wind Research and Development Consortium. Good to see our colleagues here, including the current joint solicitation with Innovate UK and the next one focused on floating offshore wind. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to the conversation and discussion and work with both existing and new partners, making new connections and starting new relationships. Kim, back to you.
Thank you, Bruce. Very helpful to know what you'll be focusing on in the coming period. I'll now like to hand over the floor to Craig Vis, who was formerly working here at the Netherlands Innovation Network on this beautiful report, which he will now present. I will give the floor to you, Craig. Oh, you're muted.
Very happy to be here and be able to talk about the report that I've been writing in between March and August of last year. I prepared some slides, Kim. Would you be able to share them for me? Thank you very much. So yeah, I wrote this report that you can see on the left. It's called An Analysis of the Offshore Wind Innovation Ecosystem Along the Northeast U.S. Coast. Throughout the report, I've been speaking with a wide variety of actors within the offshore wind industry along the East Coast, including, for instance, Kori, Bruce, but also other people who have joined. So thank you very much for making that report possible, contributing to the research and helping me in illustrating the opportunities that lie ahead of the Dutch entrepreneurs and innovators who may want to consider entering the offshore wind industry within the United States. Before we kick off, next slide, please. I would like to tell you something about myself, just as some background. I'm Craig Vis. I'm a so-called Rijks trainee at the Ministry of Education, Culture and Science in the Netherlands. I've done a rotation for 6 months at the Netherlands Innovation Network, but I actually have a background in data science and psychology of human learning and performance at the Erasmus University of Rotterdam. That is also my background. I actually work for the Education Ministry, or department, but I've been very happy to learn and actually do research into the field of innovation in offshore wind to lay down this report for you. Next slide, please. So without further ado, I just want to briefly touch upon the results of this report. We've only got a couple of minutes, and I think it's most valuable to outline the recommendation I would give to Dutch entrepreneurs if they would want to get started within the US. So I've written down three major ones. Firstly, know the key actors within the innovation ecosystem, specifically the NOWRDC. Understand the developmental phase of the industry within the United States and its needs for you to play into. Well, and that's the third point, play into these opportunities to access the ecosystem. Next slide, please. First, I want to guide you briefly through some of the major parties that we've identified. Please note that this is by no means an exhaustive list. There are many other parties spread throughout the entire Commonwealth and other regions within New England. So please do keep note of that. There are various actors within this region. First, I'd like to touch upon a couple of federal and state agencies, of which one has already introduced themselves, MassCEC. Thank you, Bruce, for doing that. But there's also the National Offshore Wind Research and Development Consortium, of which Kori is a representative. And there is also the New England for Offshore Wind Consortium. And what these parties do, well, the NOWRDC will explain themselves, and MassCEC will also do this, but they try to drive offshore wind technology within the region through various means. And that can be through R&D, that can be through networking, that can be through building up platforms, but they provide various means to drive technology and energy production within the area. Next slide, please. There are also a variety of academic institutions or institutes that are involved in performing research within the offshore wind department, each with their own specialities. I've interviewed these people as well. The University of Maine, for instance, is a big player up north, very much concerned with floating offshore wind. UMass Amherst is has a very diverse palette of research interests, for instance, focusing on the rotor blades and how to optimize those. So there's a lot of interesting stuff happening there. And as Bruce, for instance, also mentioned, there are various collaborations between these institutes and existing agencies to try and drive that research together. Next slide, please. Other institutes that perform research but are not necessarily connected on an academic level are, for instance, the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Rhode Island and the National Renewable Energy Lab that has various R&D projects spread out throughout the entire United States, but also has various research projects that are based within the New England region. Next slide, please. Finally, there are also a variety of incubators and accelerator programs that might be very interesting for smaller innovators, such as Greentown Labs, See Ahead, and the Offshore Wind Innovation Hub. Greentown Labs specifically is an interesting one to point out. Recently, they have done an accelerator program together with MassCEC, if I recall correctly, called the Greentown Go Energize program. Various small innovators have entered this accelerator program, of which a couple of Dutch ones as well, for instance, Lobster Robotics, if I remember the name correctly. And these are good examples that show how Dutch companies can interact with the US industry by, for instance, entering through these programs. Next slide, please. So I just sketched a couple of the key actors. If you really want to know a little bit more about these organizations, please dive into the report, since there is a description of what they do in there. Like I said, that list is not exhaustive. There are many different organizations throughout the US that do interesting stuff in offshore wind. I actually want to make special mention of one other organization that we spoke to that I did not mention on one of the slides. That's the New England Ocean Cluster based up in Maine, in Portland. They are not always directly related to offshore wind, but for instance, one company called Finsulet also does stuff in terms of offshore wind and trying to. It's been a long time ago, but I think they developed adhesives to wind turbines where they could, I think, keep the turbines as clean as possible so that maintenance would be kept to a minimum, whilst also creating interesting opportunities for, I think, sea life to attach themselves to the turbines so they can also cultivate or farm certain items from there. Anyway, thank you for them also for contributing to the research and to the report. Now, for Dutch entrepreneurs, it might be interesting to understand what is going on within the United States and what opportunities you may have here, over here. But first, it's important to know that there are several nuanced differences between the United States and the Netherlands that may, well, give you an idea of where both countries stand. The Netherlands, in terms of policy, has started offshore wind a long time ago. They have already, for that reason, set up a relatively big energy production, and the United States has procured a lot of energy areas for energy consumption, but are slowly making their way to exploit that target and get to where they want to be. But that means that whilst a lot of areas have been procured, the technologies and the wind parks actually still need to be built. And this may provide a window of opportunity for Dutch entrepreneurs to see what they can do there. But also important to note is that the geography, specifically in the ocean regions and its environment, provide differences in technology needs that the Netherlands may not specialize in as much as, for instance, the United States. Due to very deep waters, floating offshore wind becomes a good alternative instead of fixed offshore wind, which the Netherlands is, for instance, more used to. So there are some differences here that are important to keep in mind. Now that we've cleared that up, I've identified a couple of areas I think, based on the interviews and the research that I did, that there is a technological gap where Dutch industries might be able to play into, and these most dominantly relate to the supply chain, to the manufacturing process of offshore wind technology, and the infrastructure in terms of actually building the parks and making sure that everything works up from transmission to maintenance, etc. And this is where I would already like to foreshadow the NOWRDC a little bit. The organization has written a roadmap. By now, I think the fourth version, which is still the most up-to-date version, in which they highlight the various pillars of research and development that the industry needs in order to scale up and meet the goals that they've set out. And these might be interesting topics for Dutch entrepreneurs to have a look at, to see if there is any overlap between the technology that the industry back at home drives and might be of interest over there. Next slide, please. So that is the third advice that I'd like to give to the Dutch entrepreneurs. Play into these opportunities. Read what the industry needs. Look into the various R&D proposals that various organizations post out and present, because these might that might be a way for you to access the market. I also previously mentioned the incubators and accelerator programs, for instance, at Greentown Labs, which specifically for small innovators might be interesting to check out. And then, like I said on the previous slide, dare to play into the demand for technology and innovation, focusing specifically on the supply chain, the manufacturing process, and the infrastructure, but also keep an eye out for floating offshore wind, even though that's not the predominant technological focus of the Netherlands, but also transmission. Those we have identified as the biggest areas of technological interest. Next slide, please. I think that's it. Yeah, so this is just a really brief overview of everything that's in the report, but it goes way more in depth over there, putting into putting both countries into comparison to each other, describing a more nuanced view of how these countries differ, where the opportunities lie. So please do check it out if you've got more interest in interacting with the offshore wind innovation ecosystem in the United States. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig, for your debrief on the report. Before we move to NOWRDC, I see one question. Erwin Meijboom, thank you for your question. You're asking where can we find the R&D calls?
The R&D calls. Yeah, from what we know, they're not necessarily gathered in one area, but what I do know, for instance, is that the NOWRDC, and I don't want to get into too much of Kori's of what Kori wants to talk about, but they from time to time put out R&D proposals that might be of interest, so keep an eye out on those. But the NREL also posts or presents various R&D calls from time to time. Might be good to keep an eye on that as well. Similar to, for instance, Greentown Labs, who from time to time also make calls, for instance, for these accelerator programs. But unfortunately, there's not one central place in which these come together, as far as I know, at least.
Perhaps Kori can later also touch upon this topic, how to best tap into all the available calls here. Thank you, Erwin, for your question. So we'll move over to NOWRDC. Kori, thank you so much for being here. So Kori is a senior program manager at NOWRDC and is based in San Francisco, California. She previously worked at the MassCEC on their technology development program, and in addition to helping accelerate the development of early stage renewable energy technologies, Kori gained experience in technical communication and energy industry regulations. Kori currently leads NOWRDC's work in managing competitive solicitations, marketing, and the Offshore Wind Innovation Hub, and joint industry project formation. So thank you very much, Kori. I'll give the floor to you.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you so much for organizing this. And thanks, Craig and Bruce, for your remarks. Really excited to learn more about your work and also discuss in this conversation today. As Kim said, I'm Kori Groenveld. I work at the National Offshore Wind Research and Development Consortium. It's a really long name, so we go by NOWRDC for short. Next slide, please. So a bit of background and introduction to NOWRDC for those who aren't familiar. We were created in 2018 by the U.S. Department of Energy and the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, NYSERDA, also an important innovation ecosystem entity. They created a new nonprofit organization, NOWRDC, to advance offshore wind technology R&D through competitive grants. So DOE provided initial funding of $20.5 million, which NYSERDA matched to form a funding pool of $41 million for offshore wind R&D. And since our formation, we've grown our board of directors and our membership to include 7 states, including Massachusetts, MassCEC, 10 developers, and 12 other public and independent members. Next slide, please. And a bit more about our mission. We're a nationally focused, not-for-profit organization collaborating with industry to fund prioritized R&D activities. And we aim to accelerate the deployment of offshore wind energy in the U.S., address challenges and obstacles facing the offshore wind industry, and maximize economic and social benefits of offshore wind, and then also reduce the levelized cost of energy of offshore wind in the U.S. Next slide, please. We try to do this through several core activities. We first fund innovation directly responsive to the technical and supply chain barriers faced by offshore wind project developers in the U.S. We also work to convene strong networks, connecting technology innovators, research institutions, project developers, supply chain companies, utilities, and state and federal government agencies. And then we also work to increase US content and job opportunities. Next slide, please. Just to give a bit more color to our membership and our board, there's a lot of entities ranging from government and utilities to developers to more independent offshore wind industry members. And yeah, we work to bring all of these people together to hear what the most urgent offshore wind challenges are and how we can potentially address those through research and development projects. Next slide, please. And yeah, just a bit more specificity on how we've gone through innovation funding to date. We've hosted 3 competitive solicitations, soon to be 4, which will be announced later this week, a few new R&D project awards. And then also, yeah, through these 3 competitive solicitations to date, we've made 52 research and development project awards. This totals 34 million in our core research and development grant funding. And these awards have gathered 9.2 million in cost share funding by project partners. Next slide, please. And yeah, a bit more color on the research and development projects that we funded. We bucket our research and development project portfolio into 7 somewhat broad categories. You can see the different categories here. And I'll just note that the 2 categories we funded the most projects in are floating structure engineering and transmission and grid stability. And I think these projects reflect both the priorities that have been identified through our roadmap and from our membership, but then also I think where innovators have had the most compelling solutions. Next slide, please. And yeah, a bit more detail on where our project awards are based. It's not all just in one region of the country, it's really spread out. And it's also included a few international awardees that are not pictured on this US map. And then also our awardees comprise national labs, research universities and institutions, and then also private companies, the majority of which are small businesses. Next slide, please. And yeah, just a bit more detail on how the majority of awardees are small businesses, and then also the majority of the national labs that we funded are national lab awards are to NREL, as Craig identified earlier in his slides. Next slide, please. We're also very focused on deploying project results. So we really don't want our projects to just produce white papers that sit on a shelf. We want to, as much as possible, get the innovation that they're working on out into the industry. We do this through a couple different mechanisms. So we have project advisory boards, approximately 125 project advisors across our project portfolio. They're primarily subject matter experts within offshore wind developers on our board. And there's an average of 6 external industry advisors on each of our projects. We also have a project database. So if you're looking to learn more about any specific projects that we funded, this is all accessible on our website. If you click on the project database tab, and there's kind of a jumping off point for all of the projects there with key information to learn more. Then we also have our annual Offshore Wind Research and Development Symposium. This is a multi-day conference that happens every year, usually late fall, early winter, and it showcases our project portfolio and brings together the active researchers to learn from each other and share out what they're working on. This is a hybrid event, so it takes place in person at a rotating location, and it's also broadcast for free online, so anyone in the world can tune in. We also have recordings available for free on our website. Next slide, please. And yeah, just an example of a recent deployment that we're very excited about of one of our projects. So this was a project with Crowley, and they were looking at how to use US flagged barges as a feeder solution for the US offshore wind industry. I'm not sure if anyone on here is familiar with the Jones Act, but it's presented a logistics challenge to offshore wind development in the US. So this project looked at using a combination of a lead tug, a deck cargo barge loaded with wind turbine components, and a support tug to transfer offshore wind componentry out to the wind turbine installation vessel. And the NOWRDC project that looked into this and did a lot of work assessing the feasibility actually de-risked this as a solution that was used in the construction of the South Fork Wind Farm, which is now complete and off the coast of Long Island in New York. So yeah, we were just really excited to see that this project de-risked a solution that helped in the construction of a real offshore wind farm in the U.S. Next slide, please. And then, yeah, a couple other things that we've been working on, some kind of novel approaches beyond our traditional competitive solicitations to deliver on our mission. We formed a joint industry project looking at inter-array wake effects. We've hosted a joint solicitation with Innovate UK to leverage research expertise in the US and the UK. MassCEC is a key partner on that. We've also worked with the Denmark American Offshore Wind Collaboration, helping the Danish Technical Institute co-develop an offshore wind technology roadmap. And then we're also an official partner of the Equinor Offshore Wind Innovation Hub in Brooklyn, New York City. And we provide technical guidance and network support in that endeavor. It's also a great accelerator program, and they also have a community ecosystem program. So a good opportunity for startups looking to get a foothold in the US and New York offshore market specifically. Next slide, please. And yeah, now to talk more about the roadmap. So our roadmap serves as our overarching technical guidance document. It focuses on three very broad technology advancement pillars. So the first one is in offshore wind farm technology advancement. The second one looks at offshore wind power resource and physical site characterization. And the third pillar looks at installation, operations and maintenance, and supply chain. We update this roadmap approximately every 2 years. And as Craig mentioned, the roadmap 4.0 is the most recent one, and it was released last year in April 2023, so about a year ago. Next slide, please. Yeah, a bit of background on how we go through this roadmap process. So the original roadmap was released shortly after we were created in 2018. This served as the guiding document for drafting competitive solicitations. And then, yeah, we update this based on the continuous evolution of offshore wind in the US. And yeah, kind of the main things that we updated based on are developer interests, individual state policy actions, and just experience gained from the offshore wind industry globally. We produce this with our internal team of technical offshore wind experts from the US Department of Energy, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, and the Carbon Trust. And we gather extensive input when we're updating the roadmap, and we also gather official approval from our Research and Development Committee, who represent the intended end users of research activities and are appointed by our board of directors. Next slide, please. So yeah, a bit more detail on the different pillars. Would really encourage you to go to the roadmap itself to dive into any of these items that are of interest to you. There's a lot more specific information and background and a bit more detail on the regions of the US that these pillars apply to. But yeah, pillar 1, this focuses on technology advancements targeted at the major cost drivers of offshore wind. So accelerated innovation in this area could reduce capital costs and development and deployment risk while increasing annual energy production. This pillar can also include physical siting challenges and supply chain issues. Pillar 2 seeks improvements in offshore wind site characterization practices and technology to drive cost reduction. You'll see that's a common theme. This can include wind resource and hazards assessment, as well as geotechnical and physical site characterization. And then the third pillar seeks technology improvements in offshore wind installation, operations and maintenance, and supply chain issues related to the U.S. market and U.S.-specific socioeconomic and geophysical constraints. Topics identified in this pillar aim to lower cost and development risk. Next slide, please. So then, yeah, I was also asked to identify a few areas where Dutch researcher or innovator entities might have unique expertise and might want to kind of focus within our roadmap. So I pulled a few of the categories where we've already funded projects and identified and worked with Dutch entities. So it appears that, yeah, I think Dutch entities have some incumbent, experience in offshore wind and expertise in these areas. So the first is fixed structure engineering. A couple of projects here have involved Dutch entities. I think, looking generally at installation innovation, so different ways to install offshore wind foundations, and then also, solutions related to, or no, sorry, I was thinking about vessel installation. That'll be in a different slide, but yeah, related to installation. So our project with Texas A&M looked at vibratory installation, and they contracted Seaway 7, a Dutch engineering firm, to help with this and use expertise they had from previous offshore wind development. And then we also had a project with DEME Offshore U.S. Originally, this project was awarded to SBT Offshore, which was a Dutch startup, but then was bought by DEME. So that's why it now says DEME, but this also looked at a novel foundation concept looking at trisection pilot caissons. More detail on this is available on our website. Next slide, please. Then another area that I just know is a joint priority between the U.S. and the Netherlands is ocean area coexistence. So innovation to reduce space use conflicts and wildlife impacts, and just in general, I think, increase the compatibility of offshore wind with other ocean users. Next slide, please. And then, yeah, another area of expertise that the Netherlands has is supply and logistics. So yeah, I already highlighted the Crowley project, but we also funded a project with Marin USA, which is the Houston-based outpost of Marin, which is a Dutch entity, looking at floating feeder solutions, which is similar to the Crowley project. And yeah, I think this project also produced results looking at a feeder concept to greater enable flexibility in offshore wind development, and using feeder barges to transfer componentry to wind turbine installation vessels. This project produced results that were also borrowed by DEME Offshore, and they used this concept in the construction of Vineyard 1. So I think another highly relevant and deployable project. But yeah, I think innovation in supply and logistics is a key area for offshore wind in the U.S. Next slide, please. Yeah, those were just a couple of areas I wanted to highlight. Would encourage anyone interested to check out our full project database on our website. Of course, our roadmap is there as well. And if anyone has specific questions, happy to talk more now, or feel free to reach out via email as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kori, for this beautiful overview. And good to see that there are already connections to Dutch companies in your projects. I will continue with the future programming before going into the Q&As, if there are any. So future programming. So the 23rd of April, our colleagues at the Consulate of New York are working on a K2K session during the IPF on the topic of offshore wind installation vessels, new builds, repurposing, and retrofits. In July, we're planning to work on a report where we connect the NOWRDC R&D opportunities to the Dutch knowledge and technologies that are available. We will love to find that sweet spot where the Netherlands add value to this ecosystem, and very particularly identifying the technologies, but also the Dutch companies that are behind it. So if you're interested in connecting to this ecosystem, please reach out, and then we'll make sure to use your input in the report. This report will also give guidance to our innovation mission in October. So the 23rd till the 25th of October, where I am working together with Marcella on the innovation mission. We are planning to visit Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New York, but we're very much in the programming stage. So this is like a draft itinerary. And so that innovation mission is in the week before the ACP. So during the ACP, we're also planning a K2K session. So this is an overview of all the R&D related activities in the offshore wind that the Netherlands is organizing. So now there's opportunity for any Q&As if there's any. I'll let you think about that, but in the meantime, I do see a question in the chat, a question to Bruce. When will the Energy Innovation Center in New Bedford be ready?
It's a great question. We are in our second of a two-phase site selection process. So I think our intent is to have firm commitments on our site by the end of Q3 this year. And then we will begin some of the redevelopment, retrofit work, and be looking to have soft openings towards the end of 2025 into the beginning of 26.
All right, thank you, Bruce. I'll pause there in case there are any questions, but if not, we will also make sure to share all the contact details. And here's also my email in case you want to already ask your questions directly to me, but also connect to our LinkedIn page, the Netherlands Innovation Network in Boston. So usually we share all the opportunities, so also the research calls through our LinkedIn. So that's a good place to subscribe to. Yes. Now I'll wait for a little bit longer.
Yeah, I have a question, but it was too long to type. So
okay.
I hope I can say it directly.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I'm involved as board member of the Dutch Association for Energy from Water, also technology developer in wave energy. My question is there also any agenda, research agenda, innovation developments on system integration, like storage, but also alternative forms of energy like wave energy or floating solar, or is it mainly focused on offshore wind? I know in the Netherlands we have some studies like from TKI offshore energy, which used to be called offshore wind, so it's broadened. And also TNO has done a lot of research recently in integration of wave energy with wind, but also with offshore solar, or floating solar. So I don't know who to address the question to, but
this is a very good question. Maybe to the group. See, Bruce. I see Bruce.
Yeah, it is a great question. I'll just offer a few thoughts and let my colleagues jump in as well. Really for the Northeast or largely the East Coast of the U.S., wave energy will not be one of the sort of commercial scale renewable energy sources that we will be sort of developing. That said, certainly I'll speak for Massachusetts. We are very interested in helping entities, companies, SMEs, and others commercialize technologies for other regions. And that would be, largely through our ORE Innovation Center, but also potentially through some of our other programs that MassCEC runs and offers for startups and mid and later stage companies. I will also say that on the West Coast, there is strong interest in a lot of work that's been done by both Department of Energy, NREL, and the states of Oregon and California in particular. You'll find the Pacific National Research Lab out there, and some additional sort of testing and other assets. So folks who may be more familiar with those assets can chime in because I'm not as familiar, but I think that will give you a little bit to go on.
Yeah, I think I would totally echo Bruce's comments. I think it looks like the West Coast is looking more into wave energy, but it's still at a very early stage. I just pasted a PacWave testing facility funded by the U.S. Department of Energy and being run by several academic and national lab partners on the West Coast. So I think that might be where the more near-term opportunities related to wave energy would be in the U.S. I think from NOWRDC's perspective, we have a very narrow mandate on offshore wind, and I think we keep our ears open and we're always looking to the results of R&D projects related to the technologies you mentioned, to the extent that they can greater enable offshore wind and say increase the reliability of offshore wind power or reduce curtailment. So I think that would be the possible way that that's mentioned in our roadmap or other NOWRDC innovation materials in the future. But I think, yeah, as Bruce mentioned, there are, I think, emerging facilities on the West Coast that might have more near-term opportunities in those topics.
Thank you, Kori and Bruce, for your answers. And thank you for your question, Erin, as well. So if there are no other questions, I think we will leave it at that. I think it's a beautiful beginning of the start of the conversation, as I've said in the slides. We have a whole list of future events coming up. So yeah, I think we'll continue the conversation both online and offline. Thank you very much to all the presenters for working on the content, and we'll share this video more broadly for a bigger outreach as well. Okay, so have a good day then, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.